Perfect. Okay. So welcome to week 2 of our Thinking and Feeling Like Your Free Self course. If you weren't in last week's class, you definitely want to go back and watch that because the lessons do build on each other. You really do need the information from last week in order to take full advantage of the course and really keep moving on. But having said that, if you haven't watched week 1, that's okay. Don't leave. You're still going to benefit from the conversation today. But I do just want to encourage you to make sure that you go back and get that information as well. So just to start by kind of recapping where we are and what we've done so far, last time we talked about the kind of the big picture of how to effectively, successfully, and permanently overcome challenges with food and body. We said that there are essentially 5 pillars to this journey, and they are self-acceptance and compassion for where you are, even as you strive to make changes. Working with your brain in the ways that we know brains work to build habits or to shift out of habits that don't serve. The third pillar is aligning your thoughts to the behavior that you want, to the behavior that's consistent with your goals. And that is what the topic of this course is all about, of course. Number 4 is learning emotional resiliency so that you can allow in and process and benefit from your emotions instead of needing to turn to things outside of you, including food, movies, our phones, shopping, alcohol, whatever it is. So there's a lot of different things that we turn to in order to help us cope with emotions such as overwhelm, stress, fear, loneliness, anger, whatever it is. And then the 5th pillar being figuring out what nutrition works for your individual body. There is never a one size fits all approach. It has to be something that your body, fits your body really well, fits your lifestyle. So it's about experimenting and kind of in a systematic way, figuring out what is the nutrition that gets you where you want to go, supports your body, and also allows it to release weight. So we talked about the 5 pillars, and then we also talked about the fact that your nervous system is a huge, important player in this process due to past traumas. And trauma is there's a big, broad definition when we talk about trauma. It's basically anything that overwhelmed your nervous system at the time. So it could be, whatever it is for the particular individual. There's no set thing that it has to be. And also accumulated stress. So past traumas and accumulated stress have given a lot of us a dysregulated nervous system. We feel like we're in a stress response or in the survival state most of the time. And when that's the case, we do not build habits. We do not build new neural pathways. We stay stuck in the same patterns, even though we're putting in effort and time and trying to change. We stay stuck. And so that's why all of my work begins with laying the foundation of a healthy, regulated nervous system, which makes reaching those pillars much, much easier. So as I mentioned, this course, we kind of took out the 3rd pillar and we're looking at it on its own. And the most important thing to remember about this topic is that your thoughts create your emotions, your emotional state, and your emotional state dictates the behavior that you engage in. So your thinking essentially creates your life circumstance, which is amazing because it means that you have the power to change your life, to change your patterns just by working on your thinking. So we also talked about the fact that what is the answer? How do you start to work with your thoughts and change your thinking? What is the process by which we can do this? Because it's great to understand, wow, my thinking is responsible for my behavior. I want to change my thinking, but what does that look like? How do I, neurologically, scientifically, how do we know how our brains work so that we can take advantage of that information and apply the methodology that is the easiest and most efficient for us to actually make the changes happen. Last week, I talked about the fact that our old thoughts are like going down a smooth, steep path that is, with our roller skates on, it just happens, it's automatic. And our new thinking is just that, it's new. It's a new path that needs to be laid down in the first place and then reinforced so that our brains can say, okay, I have an option here. I can go down the old path or I can take this new path. So that's kind of what the focus of today is, because I want to help you understand better how can I build these new pathways and then reinforce them so that it's easier and easier over time to follow those instead of being stuck in my old patterns. We said the first step, which hopefully you had the opportunity this week to kind of look at, what are the thoughts that I want to change? What are the thoughts that are not serving me? And we also talked about the fact, sometimes these thoughts are so ingrained within us that we don't even really recognize them as such. We know they're back there, but it's kind of a vague understanding as opposed to with clarity. What are the thoughts? What are the words that my brain is using to express this thought? So that was the assignment last week. And I also asked you to kind of start playing with the idea of asking yourself, okay, now that I'm gaining some more awareness around the thoughts that I want to change, how could I see it differently? Or how could I feel better about that? And that was just a beginning to kind of look at that. This week, we're going to get some tools to actually dive into that part a little bit more. But before we do that, I'd really love to hear from anyone who'd like to offer, how did that practice go for you? What were some of the thoughts? Maybe they were surprising how, pervasive or how, I guess I would say, powerful and how kind of out of alignment with who you want to be, you found those thoughts to be. Is there anybody who'd like to share either in the chat or certainly just unmute yourself and offer up whatever it is that you were able to discover or how the process went? Maybe you'll say, I just really had a hard time. I kind of shut down with, I didn't want to see them, or, kind of whatever your experience was. There's no right or wrong, of course. It's just a matter of, what came up for you, because that's good information. We're always just scientists gathering information about ourselves. Yeah, with a comment came in and says, the inner child was controlling the overeating. Absolutely. The inner child, the inner child is just, oh, let's see. Let's see. I might need to mute ourselves just when you're not speaking so that I'm not showing up twice. Okay, so yeah, so I did mute you just for I definitely want to hear from you, but just for the purpose of not getting that feedback. So happy to unmute you at any time. The inner child, has needs. And a lot of times our patterns with food began as children, because as children, we don't have coping mechanisms. We don't know how to, process our emotions. Nobody's teaching us that and helping us along that journey. And so, food, we're taught as babies that food can help us, and food can help us regulate, right? And bring us back to a sense of peace and calm. And so it makes perfect sense that your inner child is very often at I guess we'll say at the steering wheel, right, of a lot of our emotional eating experiences. I would say, the next step then would be to maybe even start a conversation with that sweet inner child, saying at those times, what are you needing? What are you feeling? What are you, experiencing? And in that way, you can really start to see and eventually show the inner child that there are other ways to help her, to support her, to show her love that don't involve food. But it's never here, I'm talking to you and I'm paying attention to you because I don't want you to use food anymore. Like that would make her, obviously scared. Like, I'm not ready for that and resistant to you. So it's always with the kind of approach, like there's something better for us. And over time, we'll figure out what that is. But gently, and today, whatever you're doing, is perfectly fine. We don't want to create that resistance in that fear, right? Because if we're talking about, nope, you can't use the food anymore, now that we're aware that that's happening for you, you got to stop. But we're not ready for that step yet. And so it just feels, we just shuts down our process, and our progress just shuts it down, because it is more, we're trying to push further than where we actually are. So it's a meeting of ourselves where we are always. And the inner child, she just needs to be heard and understood. So I love that you got had awareness around that, and that she's showing up for you. The next comment is that sometimes my thoughts mimicked, admonishments that received from my parents. Of course, right? When we're kids, we are trying to make sense of the world, and we're taking in the information from all around us, right? We're developing our inner voice, and we develop it based on all of the influences around us. It's interesting. Our inner voice when we're babies is like, we couldn't be better, right? As babies, we're like so in love with ourselves. We're like, oh my gosh, look at my toes, look at my feet. And we love ourselves so much. We couldn't even imagine that there's anything wrong with us, right? And then we start to internalize all the messages that are coming in, and we get a sour face when, not us, but when we see a sour face, when we cry or we get into something, we're like, oh, maybe I'm not the most perfect thing in the world. And over time, and especially if you have people in your environment who are often well-meaning, but unfortunately not feeding you with the kind of love and respect and teaching you how magnificent you are, then we start to take on that language and use it as our internal voice. And those are the kinds of voices that show up in, especially in these moments when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or whatever it is, and not enough, right? And these are the very things that then cause us to need comfort, and comfort, of course, being the easiest thing possible, which is food in a lot of cases. The next comment says, I put 3 self-check-in times on my calendar. It took me several days to remember it was not just the feeling that I was, to be recording the thoughts. I had lots of resistance to writing my thoughts. Yep. Decided to write on my phone instead, having to go to my journal. Yeah. And that is, I really love that you had that revelation that this is what's happening for me. Right. And it's tricky, very tricky, because like I said, sometimes we just have a vague sense, or we might say, I don't feel good, or I feel kind of down, or I feel, something that's really vague like that. And until we get to know what it is that we're thinking and experiencing, we can't develop the replacement thoughts in a very effective way. And so what you're experiencing is very, very common and wonderful. And I'm glad that you are taking those steps. And, whatever the progress looks like, it's okay, because it's progress and it's excellent work. Noticing that resistance and just not judging it, but just saying, oh, isn't that interesting? Yeah. Why would I feel resistant to noticing my thoughts? And there's a couple reasons, probably many reasons, but one of them is, do I really want to see these? Right? First of all, I don't like them. Why would I want to experience them? I'm trying to get rid of them, push them under the rug as quickly and as thoroughly as I can. Why would I want to sit in them and think about them and wallow in them? Right? The other thing is, these thoughts, your subconscious wants to protect you. And so there's some element of you that says, I don't know what's going to happen if I drag these thoughts out and start to work with them. I might change. How will I change? Change is scary. Our brains are not wired to easily accept change. Our brains are wired to go down the same path that we've always been down, because we survived. So our survival system is not interested in, are you living your highest, best life? Your survival system is concerned with, am I going to survive this experience? So sometimes we start digging things up, and there's a very real part of us that says, I don't want to change. I don't know what change looks like, and it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel natural. And so we find the resistance. But just noticing that and saying, okay, I'm seeing that, and that's okay. That's my brain doing its job, but I'm not my brain. I get to step back and just and connect to who I truly am, right? That inner voice that is wise and sacred. And that is the voice that I want to listen to, instead of this fearful voice that doesn't quite know how things are going to look. But we can trust that, this process, even at times it may feel a little bit like we're putting on an itchy sweater or something, we can trust that this process will continue us, one step at a time as we're ready. Like I said, never trying to reach too far, away from where we are today. We can trust that, okay, it's okay for me to feel like I'm wearing an itchy sweater around this. It's okay that I have some resistance to noticing my thoughts, but I'm going to continue and just see what comes up at the pace that feels right to me. And that's how we keep going forward, instead of pulling on the emergency brake and be like, nope, not going any further than this, because it feels too threatening. So just being really gentle about the process and allowing it to unfold as it will is one of the best ways that we can keep going forward. So is there anybody else? These are all really awesome realizations. And I just encourage you, this is a process. So in a week's time, do I expect that you got in touch with every single thought that needs, working with? No, of course not. It's takes as long as it takes, and that's okay. But every time you try, you are making progress. So I just really want to encourage you to keep looking in the best way that you can. So if it's putting it on your phone, that's awesome. If it's writing it down, but do kind of experiment with it, because a lot of people will say that when they're writing things down, that they have better access to those parts. Question, what do you do when you cannot name how you feel? Yeah, and that's very common for those of us who have struggled in this way, because we are not used to doing this. We're like, oh, something, I don't know what this is, get away from me, and we just like want to throw it off as quickly as possible. And that's why we're running to the food, because it helps us to do that. So the fact that right now you can't name it, that's okay. That's to be expected. But the more often you can just sit in that way that is, meeting yourself where you are, not pushing so much that you're, really getting into that space of overwhelm, but just gently saying, okay, I can't quite name it right now. Maybe it's a little bit of this, maybe a little of that. Don't get nervous that you can't name it, or feel like, oh, this isn't working because I can't name it. I'm never going to get anywhere. I'm not doing it right. All of those things distract you from actually being able to even glean, just a little bit of what's happening. I guarantee you, every time you sit with yourself and let yourself just give you a little bit more information. The way I describe it, sometimes it's kind of like our emotions, we've not been receptive to them in a lot of ways. We have pushed them away and not honored them. And so it's kind of like if you had a neighbor who was just an awful neighbor, who, put their trash in your trash can when theirs got full, and was, blaring their music all the time, never got your packages delivered, but never brought them over. Just, all the things you can imagine about a neighbor, letting their dog come over and dig holes in your yard, etc. And then one day that neighbor shows up at your door and is like, hey, I really want to come in and have coffee and be your best friend, right? You'd be kind of like, okay, maybe we should take this a little bit slow, right? That's kind of how I think of our emotions. When we first start opening up to them, the emotions are like, wait a minute, you've been pushing me down and trying to make me go away for a long time here. So we kind of have to coax them out and be gentle and just be willing, right? To have that as a process, to be, okay, this might take a little bit of time. But if I'm not caught up in the struggle or the, judgment around the fact that I can't quite get in touch with them, but just trust over time, I will be able to, then that is an atmosphere in which they can show up more comfortably, and you can have access a little bit better, because you're not being distracted by the judgment or the, need for it to look differently. So that's beautiful that you're at the point right now where you're like, okay, I'm having emotions. I can't quite name them. That's awesome. The fact that you're aware of, okay, my emotions are here. That in and of itself is something to celebrate truly, in every step of the way as you get more clarity around it. So yeah, anything else before we continue on? I love this. I'm really, really proud of you guys for digging into this assignment and gathering this information, which is very, very helpful. So I guess, I'll mention though I did get some emails and some feedback and also just from working with people, we seem to get a lot of the same thoughts, right? And that's because we're being fed collectively the same kinds of thoughts. So it makes sense that we would be experiencing them. A lot of them are things like losing weight is just really hard. It's just a really hard process. I don't have time to meal plan or prep. I just really love food. I have no power when it comes to food. I've never been able to lose weight permanently or sustainably, so I never will. And also this one, talk about vague thoughts. Food is the only way that I can get through this moment. So that thought is one that, you're not actually maybe hearing those words, but if you were able to really connect with what's going on in the moment when you're reaching for food and you don't want to, what's often happening is you're having that experience. Like right now, I feel really overwhelmed. I feel really stressed. I feel whatever it is that you're feeling. And I don't think I can survive this moment unless I use food to help me through it. And again, it sounds ridiculous. You're like, really? I'm so convinced that I'm going to die if I force myself to live through this moment without using food to help me. But yeah, that's exactly what the subconscious thinking is. And so when you can recognize that and also recognize it, it's just a thought. It's just something that my brain has begun to believe because I have taken that route so many times. I've been in those situations. The only way I felt any relief is by eating. So my brain has developed the belief the only way I can have relief here is by doing what I know to do, eating. So as we can start to identify these and disassociate ourselves, our true selves, from the chatter, these thoughts that are happening in our brain, we can start to see and feel really empowered by the fact that we can stop those. We can change this mental chatter over time. That is not something, even when you gain awareness, I don't want you to feel like, I know better. Why are these thoughts still coming back? That's something that we run into in this process because we do reach a point like now where you're gaining some awareness and now you're going to have some tools. So you're going to create expectations for yourself and you're going to say, I know better. I even have the tools and yet I did it again yesterday and I didn't. And of course you did, because remember, we're talking about this smooth, steep pathway that has been traveled so many times. It takes time to build the other one. So while that's happening, just have patience and grace with yourself and it will happen. It's just, think about these examples and how every time you're, building that new pathway. And as I said last week too, we want to go into the jungle, instead of a butter knife, we want to go in with a machete. And the way we do that is by understanding our brains and using the methodology that's actually effective. So that's what I want to turn to now. I want to talk about 2 tools that I want to give you today that you can take into your week. And these are tools that will help you with that second part that I explained. How can I see this differently? What are my new thoughts going to be? Because what we don't want to do is just say, don't think that, right? That doesn't work. And we also don't want to say, go to the best thought that we could possibly think. Because when we don't believe a thought, when it doesn't truly resonate with us, I have a client who calls it her bullshit meter, and it'll be like, nope. And she just closes down to it. It's just done. And that's true. Our brains are not receptive. We might feel better for a second, for 5 minutes, but ultimately we're not building a new pathway with a thought that is just too far beyond where we are. So let me give you an example of that. A lot of times, some of our thoughts are around our body, and we may have this sense of a stress that, my body is not okay the way it is. Some people will tell me, when I look in the mirror, I say, I'm disgusting, right? Which makes me so sad to think about, but it's true. So if you're standing and you're having that conversation with yourself, those are your thoughts. And you try to tell yourself, my body is perfect just the way it is. I don't need to lose weight at all. It's totally fine. Your brain is like, yeah, okay, whatever. You're not establishing a new pathway that represents that fleeting thought, because it's just too far from your actual thinking. So the tool is called what I call stepping stone thoughts. And so what you want to do is you want to think about where you are and recognize where you are, and then choose a thought, try some different thoughts on, and choose a new thought to replace it with that's not quite as far, right? That doesn't create so much resistance. You can recognize it like, okay, this is a thought. I can tell I'm moving into this thought, that it's not my normal thinking, but I'm not pushing myself into this, Pollyanna that essentially just kind of invalidates how I'm actually feeling, right? So in the example that I gave about, my body is terrible, I have to lose weight quick and all of that stuff. Again, you're not going to go all the way to I'm a picture of perfection or whatever it is. You're going to want to go to some place that is a little bit more believable. So you might say something like, today I don't feel comfortable in the body that I'm in. So that's okay. And I accept that. So you're recognizing where you are. You're not trying to, push it away or say, hey, you can't be here. You're saying, okay, I recognize this is where I am. Thankfully, I've found a way to come back into alignment with my healthy weight and body. I need to be patient, but a whole new way is possible or beginning for me. Something like that. And for each one of you, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because you're at different places and your brain will allow something a little bit different. And then you don't have to sit down and come up with it like that. You could spend a little bit of time. What is the thought that I want to move into? And if that feels like too much, and it might, you could just simply say, I'm ready and willing to change. Let that be your stepping stone, your first, step into the ultimate way that you want to feel. And then over time you say, wow, I'm no longer having that thought about being disgusting or, that sense of urgency around, I have to do this now. Wow. Okay. Now I'm ready for an even better feeling thought. And we can move up the thought ladder in that way. So I think that that is something, that tool in and of itself is really helpful. And I would love for you to play with that. So, continue tracking your awareness and then looking at the thoughts and saying, how could I replace this with something that honors where I am today, but moves me a little bit further along my journey without too much resistance? So these are, like I said, these are the way that we bring a machete into our building our new pathways instead of the butter knife, because it works with your brain instead of rejecting your new thought. That's why positive affirmations are not the end all be all for a lot of people. I'm not against them at all. I use them, but you need to try them on and see, like, is this something that actually resonates with me? Or is this just so far outside of, far away from where I really am that it's just not really doing much for me? And that is the question that you can ask yourself. So any questions about stepping stone thoughts, or does anyone have any, issues thinking to yourself, how would I shift this thought as you get into the week and you start working with this? If you're struggling to create a new thought, let's talk about it. Send me an email and let's figure out what, maybe I could suggest a couple of things just to get you started, and then you can fill it in for yourself. But this is how, actually working. And I know that, some resistance might come up around, ooh, do I really want to change my thinking? What does that look like? It's okay. I notice, yeah, it makes sense that I'm feeling a little apprehensive about change. That's my brain doing its job. It's like we've gone down to the water hole every day, following the same path. It takes us 15 minutes, but we've never seen any wild animals or anything. So we're going to keep going down that path. And then someone's like, hey, I found this new path to the water hole. And our brain is like, I ain't take it. There could be wild animals or snakes or enemy tribe, whatever. I'll just, take my 15 minutes, and that feels safe. So it doesn't matter that this 5 minutes, I'm going to gain all this time in my day and it's going to be better for me. I'm not willing to do it. And that's kind of what's happening here with our brains that just want us to stay in the place where we are because we're alive and surviving. So it's okay just to notice that. Like, we don't have to, it's my brain fighting me. No, it's just your brain doing its job. But we don't have to keep, we don't have to follow those things that served us when we were, hunters and gatherers and things. We have the ability to choose something else. So that's really powerful. You can notice it, but then say, that's not me. That's just, the way sometimes the thoughts that my brain will give me, but I'm not my brain. I'm this higher self. And I have the power to think whatever I want. Okay, so the second tool I want to give you is something called evidence journaling. So, as we're talking about a lot of our thoughts, we have thought so many times that it's really hard to even imagine that they're not true, right? For example, losing weight is hard. It's probably difficult for you to have the belief that that's not true, right? Or that I can get through particular moments without needing to use food. Like those two things especially, and we all have our own, that just feel like, gosh, I really have question whether I can even doubt this statement, right? And that's when evidence journaling can come in really powerfully. Right now, because of something called confirmation bias, your brain is always looking for and noticing the things that prove what you believe. So just for example, to take an easy example that's more simple to understand, if your belief is that drivers are rude, you're going to be driving down the street. You're going to notice everybody who honks their horn. You're going to notice everybody who cuts anybody else off or doesn't let somebody in. Your brain is going to be really attuned to those things. And your brain will ignore the person who does let somebody over, or the person who used their signal and, doesn't honk at the person who doesn't go immediately when the light turns green. Your brain literally will not see those things. Maybe you've had the experience too, where you learn a new word or see something and then it's popping up everywhere. Well, it could be a synchronicity. I totally believe in that, but it could also be that you've overcome the confirmation bias. Now that is in your awareness. And so your brain will notice it. And so this is what we want to do to start building the new thought, to start allowing a new thought to be able to come in and be accepted. Okay, so you're going to go into your day. Say, for example, you have the belief, I never finish things. I start things, but I never finish them. If you have that belief, things like, sticking with something that's working well for you, meal planning, or some kind of movement that you're doing, or even carrying through with this course, showing up to weeks 3 and 4, right? Those kinds of things are going to be difficult for you if your belief is, I don't finish things. So, and you're also going to see in your world all the books over there that, yeah, I started those books. I never finished them. I had this scrapbooking project or whatever it is, didn't finish it. See, look around. Here's all the evidence, right? But that's just confirmation bias. Your brain is just literally shut off to all the ways that you do finish things. So evidence journaling is just like it sounds, you with your journal or however you want to go about doing it, looking for the evidence that your new belief that you want to believe is true. So in our example, where is the evidence in my life that I do finish things? that I do, carry things to the end. If we look purposefully and mindfully for this, we are going to find it. We're going to find evidence that losing weight doesn't have to be hard. I see it all the time when they start putting the different aspects together, and they have their nervous system that is not stuck in survival. Weight loss is not hard. I can give you lots and lots of examples, and you will see examples. Like, I don't know if you've ever had the experience or known somebody who went on vacation, and because they were just, got themselves out of the survival mode, and they were relaxed and they were having fun, and they ended up losing weight on vacation, even though they were, enjoying themselves and had a drink by the pool or whatever. And that's evidence that weight loss does not have to be so hard. It's hard when we go into that all or nothing, when we're like, it has to be, I have to be cutting out everything, and it has to be, this by the book everything. And then of course, we're not meant to sustain things like that. And then we swing the whole other way. And yeah, that cycle is hard, but that doesn't have to be what weight loss looks like. That doesn't have to be what we keep doing. And so weight loss as a bigger picture, as a concept, doesn't have to be hard. The all or nothing approach to anything, yes, granted, is hard. So start looking for the evidence. Well, and this requires, of course, the awareness, right? We always have to have that. What am I looking to believe instead? But we have to know what we're believing in the first place in order to establish that. What am I going to be looking for? So, these are things that do not look for or expect, to find these big, enormous things that you did. So for example, if we're looking at the, I never finish things, things that you can put and find for your evidence journaling is, I got ready this morning, right? I started getting ready this morning and got myself all ready and out the door. I finished that. I started it and I finished it. I finish books all the time. I finish my work projects, and then, list a couple of things that you've actually finished. I started making lunch. I finished making lunch. I learned French in high school. I finished, really, right? You started a cleaning project. You started cleaning the bathroom. You finished cleaning the bathroom. All of these things are really evidence that you do finish things. And the more you see, and even if that's where you have to start, as small as, I started brushing my teeth and I finished that job. If that's as small as you have to stop, fine. You start, that's a great place. Let's see, I just want to check the chat here. Let's see, I just want to make sure that even if it was clear for you, that somebody else might be having the same question. So it says, in evidence journaling, are we taking our negative belief, looking for evidence to disprove that thought, or making a new belief, let's see, that we don't yet believe and trying to prove it? Both, absolutely. Using it in whatever way is helpful. And I do think that, it's kind of the same, two sides of the same coin, right? We're looking for ways that that's not true, and then ways the opposite is true. And in that way, we can really start to at least question, right? In the beginning, maybe that's all we accomplish is questioning, maybe that's not true. And that opens us up to something else being true. So it really is, again, all of these things are a process. With different thoughts, you might find, oh, I moved into a new thought rather quickly and easily. With some thoughts, they may just keep coming around because they are so ingrained. Maybe they threaten you, your sense of safety in some way, and so those are going to be a little harder to work with. But others, maybe you haven't had them as long, or they're just a little bit easier for you, whatever reason. So really start to notice how it works with certain thoughts. And you might even play with a thought that you think you can change pretty easily to begin with, so that you can see how the process works, gain some confidence in your ability to do that. So it's, again, it takes some practice, some grace for yourself to just recognize, I am building something new in my brain, and It's all okay. There's no expectations on the timeline or any of that. So let's see, I just want to make sure, look at this and see if there was something else I thought was important to mention. Yeah, that's all the stuff we talked about. So this week, I'm going to suggest that you kind of stay maybe with that same system where you give yourself a few periods during the day, whatever that looks like. And I really want to encourage you, our brains will be like, I'm going to spend 30 minutes 4 times a day, or, that's wonderful and beautiful. If you have the energy for that and the time, that's amazing. And you will, benefit from that. But if you have 1 minute or 3 minutes, that's really good too, because it's all about, matching where you are today. If we're pushing for that 30 minutes, we don't do it, then what does that do? It puts us in a sense of failure, a sense of, I'm not doing what I should be. I knew it. This isn't going to work for me, all that kind of stuff. And that's just going to spiral into a situation where you're not going to have the motivation, the energy, or the confidence to continue. So literally, if it's 1 minute and you're stopping and noticing and just asking the question, I'm giving you this as kind of the roadmap. But it's not to say that this week it needs to look like anything in particular. It's going to look like whatever you have time, energy, space, life force to do. Okay. And so I really just want you to have, that awareness and congratulate yourself every time you stop and notice a thought, every time you think, even if you say to yourself, I'm sure there's a better feeling thought out there that would help me. If that's all you do, great. Just keep with that and you will keep moving into better and better thoughts. We've got somebody joining here. So, so I just want to encourage you to continue doing that and then use these 2 tools. How could I apply evidence journaling to this thought that I recognize I want to change? How can I use stepping stone thoughts in this thought that I want to change so that I can move myself in a way that doesn't create all that resistance and struggle? We don't accomplish anything in resistance and struggle. So, we're not taught that, right? We're taught go hard and get it done and all that. And you can see how that's worked out for you. It's not. We want to be gentle. We want to be gentle. And that will actually be the quickest, most efficient way to get to where we're going. Our brains will say, no, you got to go quicker. You got to do it all. You could be doing so much more. You could be doing so much better. Brain, come on, man. We've been down that road before, right? The resistance just keeps us stuck in the cycle. Question, could evidence journaling topic be, I'm a lazy person because the house is a mess. I'm not exercising. Exactly. Yeah. And, there's, with respect to that, so you're going to be looking for the evidence that you're not. I mean, you showed up here today. That's awesome, right? That is not what a lazy person does. A lazy person's like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do to change. A lazy person does not show up. And recognize too that a lot of what I was talking about with respect to the nervous system and things like that all play into how much energy we have to put into these things, because when your nervous system has been on high alert, when you've been stuck in survival, right? We don't have the energy. We don't have the physical energy. We don't have the mental energy, the emotional energy, none of it to take on new things. So even if you're feeling like I'm not doing as much as I think my true self could do, this is just a temporary thing. And as you continue on your journey and do, learn new tools and apply them, you're going to become different in every aspect. So the fact that you're not getting everything that you could imagine doing done right now does not mean you're lazy. It could mean, 1,000 other things that you're understanding. But for now, just keep looking for those places, right, where you are showing up powerfully. And this is one of them. This is, this gets you a lot of points. So make your list, and I think that you'll find a lot of ways that you are definitely not a lazy person, not at all. Yeah, so I hope at this point that you're feeling a little bit empowered. Like there are things I can do. I am not subject to my brain. Yes, it takes some time and some patience. I understand that. I wish, I could give you some magic tool that would, instantly change it all. But I think the journey itself is very valuable too. So I don't even know if I had that tool. I don't know that I would hand it out like that, because I think there's so much beauty in showing up for yourself and in this process that we would miss out on. So go ahead and think about and maybe make a plan for yourself. How will you bring this into your everyday? How will you, set a timer or a sticky note? Will you do it before meals or after meals? Just tie it to something else that you're already doing in order just to make some space for it. And if it's a minute, that's amazing, honestly. And then, maybe there's some times when you're feeling more contemplative and you can spend a little bit more time. Great. But whatever you do, celebrate that, because that's what's going to keep you doing it and take you to your next level. So I just want to mention too, that if you're feeling excited about the potential here, you want to learn more, explore more about the bigger picture or your thoughts, let's talk about that, because I've opened enrollment for my group freedom course that starts in March. So I just want to let you know that is open, and I do like to keep that group small. So if you're at all thinking about it, I want to make sure that you have a space. And so we can certainly, talk about that. But I just really appreciate you spending time, and I'm here for you on this journey, regardless of whether you continue into, program, whatever. I'm just letting you know that that's available, because I'm sure there's some of you that will, want to consider going all the way with it. But 100%, I am here. So reach out. I really want this information to be valuable to you. So if you're getting on, starting to use it and you're like, I'm kind of getting stuck here, I don't know how to take it, reach out, please, because don't let that be the reason or the thing that stops you, because you've already put in lots of beautiful effort. So let's just keep going with that and see how far you can take it, so I'm here. And let's see, I noticed, and I think Monique too, you guys, I'll send out the replay for you so you can watch the first half that you weren't able to see. But I just appreciate you guys and really admire you. I know, because I was in your place, right, for decades. So I know exactly how hard it is to put yourself out there again, to say, I'm gonna keep trying. And it's such a beautiful part of humanity, of and especially the people that I see. Like, it blows me away how resilient we are and how we refuse, right? We have this thing in us that's like, no, there's something better. I know it. And we keep looking for it. So I'm excited for that for you, and just want to encourage you to do what you can this week using the tools, and wherever I can be of help, let me know. Yeah. Anything else before we sign off today? No? Okay. Great job. Really, I really appreciate you and admire you guys. You're inspiring. So keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Okay. Bye-bye.